the benefit doesn't come from the training, it comes from the focus. And he spends quite a bit in the book talking about that, the making the distinction between explicit needs and implicit needs and being able to listen for that. There's also consultative selling. You're solving the person's problems, and your solution, your offer or product or service is the solution. This is why I was saying this kind of conversation puts salespeople in an awkward spot, because if you take it through the natural path, the salesperson would be telling the person that they're not a good prospect. If a typical sales manager heard their salesperson tell a prospect that they're probably not a good prospect for this particular service or product, not all of them, but some of them would have a challenge with that. Imagine being seeing a car salesman tell the sales manager that, yeah, that I didn't tell him that car because he wanted a blue one and we only have red. That's not going to fly. They're supposed to sell the red one. They've got to rework it to sell the red one. And that's different from what a business owner is going to be doing or what a doctor is going to be doing with a patient. We don't want to be selling people on stuff that they don't need. And then there's NEAT selling, N-E-A-T, the need, economic impact, access to authority, timeline. So a lot of these acronyms and mnemonics are there to help salespeople work through it. Understand that when we get into the solution part, it's consistent with that. You will leave the second session with enough information to start working on your own sales process / methodology. Obviously, we won't get into that. That's much more of a workshop exercise where you have to literally work through the kinds of open-ended questions, the kind of either-or questions that you're going to use. What does the close look like? What kind of objections are you likely to get? That's going to be out of scope here, but you'll see the placeholders that we use in the framework. I'll give you the sales framework so you have an idea as to whether or not you even want to tune in. The first thing you have is you have to have rapport. I'm going to use confirm so that I don't trip over the word qualify. But remember, I said we're starting with an interested person and an interested prospect, and we have to confirm that there's some interest. And then we start building on the know, like, and trust. So this might be a place where you exit out of the conversation. And then we're going to take that into fact finding. There's no rocket science here because all sales processes follow a similar track. We have fact finding. I added, instead of just going into the presentation, I added transition because there's things that have to happen in this transition, and I need to call that out. And then we have demonstration. The reason I call it demonstration instead of presentation is, one, I want it more active, and two, I want it more prescriptive based on what we found in the fact finding. So in the demonstration, you're not just presenting, you're actually demonstrating how this meets their needs. You're using illustrations, examples, you're putting them into it, you're involving them. And then we have the recommendation and we have the close. Now this recommendation will sound like a close in traditional selling. This recommendation is actually the close, but the reason I don't call it a close is because closing ratios tend to be 20, 30, maybe 40%. So most of the people who receive a close don't buy. So rather than make that the close, that is the first opportunity for them to buy. And I call it a recommendation. That's the first opportunity for them to buy. Close becomes the second, third, and fourth opportunity to buy. So the stall and objection procedure is actually built into the close. And then we have referrals. And the referrals would happen if they buy at the first stop, the second, so referrals always happen. And this is just a rough of the framework, and we'll go through, we should be able to get through the first half of the transition next week, and then we'll do the second part the following week. And I'll throw in some additional help that we can use for the mental game, because there is a big mental game, both for you and the person who's buying. We'll also talk about how to maintain control through this process, and we'll get into it next week, Friday morning, to do episode 5, which is part 2 of the 3-part sales framework for non-sales professionals miniseries.